intervention in the politics of Niger. As long as the citizens are involved in it and the citizens are happy with their state, with the state of things in Niger, no country, no organization, whether it is a regional organization, I believe, has the right to impinge on the sovereignty of the people of Niger. Because at this stage, it is no longer about a few people who make up the military establishment. It is about those within the military establishment in full support, having full support of the people of Niger. And when you have that, then it becomes a very complex and difficult situation. And ECOWAS will be stepping out of line to now say to the Nigerian people, we do not care what you think, we do not care how you view your government and your country. We are the ones that should determine what will happen to you. Why do you think that a lot of people up to today are talking about the evil of colonialism? Because some people sat down somewhere in the Council of Berlin and they petitioned Africa among themselves. They had no right under any circumstance, to do what they did. And we are still suffering from the vestiges of colonialism. So this is absolutely wrong for the ECOWAS at this stage.
All right, Chude.
For instance, go on.
Sorry to interrupt you. From what you've said, it makes a lot of sense, because if we follow the politics in Africa now, you would see even in South Africa, Malema, who's a member of the South African House of Assembly, Museveni, we have the Rwandan president, we have Paul Kagame, and the list goes on, and everybody beginning to take impositions and beginning to look at this as the Western world wanting to be a lot more imposive and deciding what we do in Africa, and just another form of colonialism, if you put it that way. From all that you have said, my major focus or point now would be on, some have said perhaps Niger was signed to certain treaties or charters with the ECOWAS and certain things that they should live by, especially democracy being one of them. If there are any of those, does it give the ECOWAS any rights to say, well, you can't continue with a military system of government, we have to reinstate the president?
Look, the discussion is democracy.
Yes.
In which of these countries do we have democracy? In which of these countries? In which of these countries have the politicians, for instance, not been, carrying out coups, civilian-induced coups against the constitution of these countries? Now you have in West Africa, you have Macky Sall, for instance, who wanted to run for a third term, but because of public pressure, Macky Sall of Senegal, because of public pressure, he was able to turn it down. But he has arrested his opposition leader, and then banned the opposition political party, so that it will now be, because that puts his own party in a position to win the elections. It's not democracy. That is not democratic under any circumstance. You also have the Faure Nyasemba, the president of Togo,
yes,
whose father was in power for 36 years after he killed the first civilian president. He killed the first head of state of Togo, Stefano Olympio, and then he was in power for 36 years. He died in power, handed over to his son. The son had the constitution changed after the second term or so, and the son has been in power for 18 years. So you look at the whole of West Africa, you see dictators that are there. You are talking about, we must make a distinction between civilian governance and democratic governance. That a civilian government is in place does not imply that you have a democracy, because some of the worst democracies in the continent, the African continent, have been perpetuated by supposedly democratic government. You are talking about Zaire, Mobutu Sese Seko. You are talking about the Central African Republic, under Jean-Baptiste Bokassa, the butcher of the Central African Republic. You are talking about Uganda, at the time when the former Ugandan strongman has transited, to a civilian president, and they were all running elections in those countries. And yet you never had democracy. So So I think, this application with democracy, we also have to be careful about it. Yes, it is right. Yes, military intervention in politics is an aberration to democracy. But truly, do we have democracy in Africa, in West Africa, most especially, where you have gross abuse of human rights by civilian.
But then in some of these countries, the people seem to be comfortable with it. For example, Museveni was, a military leader, is the president of Uganda now. And I think Ugandans largely seem to be comfortable with his ideas and how he's leading the country, which is not really my focus of the conversation. We might get to that. We have a short commercial coming. We might get to all of these because even in South Africa, I was thinking about Malema of the EFF, who is also very vocal about some of these issues in the ECOWAS, and there are even many other leaders who are saying Africa needs to break its boundaries, have a common currency, and hold our economy by ourselves and not allow the Western world dictate what and how we do and begin to copy what they do over there. For many people, the focus has been why the pressure on Niger. Burkina Faso is also part of the ECOWAS. Mali is also part of the ECOWAS. And before now, we have heard the ECOWAS speak firmly with regards to the situation in Burkina Faso or Mali, to a point of even saying we are going to consider a forceful, using force. But then with Niger, suddenly it seems as though the ECOWAS just woke up and becoming too serious about it. What is particular?
There are two factors responsible for that. One is the fact that it would appear that ECOWAS is feeling that they have allowed these things to go on for too long, and it continues to spread. So there's a real worry that if care is not taken, it will also spread and go to a country like Nigeria. Don't forget that when Buhari, when he was president, at the time when he was contemplating removing the fuel subsidy, he got an advisory from the DSS warning him about the implication of that, and that advisory from the DSS also informed him that the state of military coups happening in the West African region you cannot wish it away, even from happening in Nigeria, because removal of that subsidy could create all kinds of social and economic crisis for the people. So on that basis, Buhari decided not to touch it. Now, beyond that again is the fact that a lot of the ECOWAS heads of state are worried it could happen. Now, people have made the argument again, and it might not be true, it might be true also, that the president of Nigeria is still battling in the legitimacy issue. For as long as that matter, the presidential election, of which he's a beneficiary of now, remains in court, there will always be a question mark about the legitimacy of his presidency, whether we like it or not, until the court makes a ruling.
All right, Mr. Chude. Mr. Chude, sorry to interrupt you. Mr. Chude, please, if you can hear me, just hold on. Let's go for a very short commercial, 3 minutes commercial, and then we'll come back and get you on the phone and continue with the conversation. All right, quickly sending your thoughts to us on WhatsApp and on Facebook. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Nigeria Info. We'll be right back.
the African Affairs Analyst, Achike Chude. Mr. Chude, thank you very much for staying on the line.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Join the conversation. Send in your WhatsApp messages 0809-030-6416. We're asking already, should Nigeria or any country decide a system of government another country should operate? Let us know what you think about that on Facebook. Engage with that comment, that post. Nigeria Info 92.3 PH. Again, Nigeria Info 92.3 PH on Facebook, and on Twitter, Nigeria Info PH. Oh, I beg your pardon. On X, Nigeria Info PH. I'll come back to you now, Mr. Chude. So yes, you were talking about why. I was asking why Niger. Yes, exactly.
Niger. Yeah. So what I was saying essentially is that there's a possibility that the matter has gotten out of hand, and other communities, other countries in West Africa are feeling threatened that if they don't stop it and now do something much more aggressively to dissuade it will continue. Don't forget that the ECOWAS has been involved in all of the coups that have taken place, whether in Guinea, in Mali, in Burkina Faso. ECOWAS has been involved in every single one of them, trying to get the military dictatorships in those countries to come up with a transition program that will bring those countries back to democracy. And it would seem it has not worked with this latest coup. So that is the worry that they
But in Burkina Faso,
very strong.
Leader for the transition government,
the fact that Tinubu, has become the president of Nigeria. So perhaps he wants to show he's strong, But I think that he seems to lack, an understanding of the dynamics of international politics. Because immediately this coup took place, what it did was to put the first in, the last first, and that is threats against the military junta, asking them to immediately hand over power. Once you do that, then you make the situation worse. There must be a process of engagement. The last resort should be the first thing that you have done, and that is to use the threat of violence
now that you brought up the president, quickly, let's just put this in. Many people have said, the president is responsible, but then we know that the ECOWAS is made up of several countries, closely about more than 15 of them, if I'm not mistaken, 10 of them, or 15 members, yes, 15 of them, and then the 15 of them have to be involved in this decision making. Can the president of the ECOWAS unilaterally, in this case President Tinubu, say this is what we are going to do and everybody must follow?
No, he might not be able to do that unilaterally. But don't forget that Nigeria has more influence than any other country. So the president of Nigeria, who coincidentally is the chairman of ECOWAS, has much more influence than most of the countries in ECOWAS. And so what you have, for instance, if you look at the activities of ECOMOG, by the time ECOMOG started, in Sierra Leone, then Liberia, Nigeria went into Liberia without seeking consensus from the sub-region. Even though countries in the sub-region many of them were happy with what Nigeria was doing, but there was this complaint that, because some of them felt threatened. So what Nigeria did was to incorporate them into the ECOMOG, and they became part of the ECOMOG. But I can tell you that about 75 to 80% of all the resources that were spent in prosecuting the war in in Sierra Leone and in Liberia were monies or resources from Nigeria. Then about 75 to 80% of the troops that were used in those wars were Nigerian troops. So when you have this kind of strength, then you have more influence, within the regional body. I can tell you that even within Africa, many years ago, Nigeria was one of the highest contributors of the African Union. First of all, the OAU and African Union. Now, Nigeria is one of the highest donors, for the African Union, and that gives you strength. That gives you, influence within, that setting. So for ECOWAS, we are dominating in terms of our contributions to ECOWAS, and that's what gives you the ability to influence other countries. And so when Nigeria talks, if any other country within ECOWAS, for instance, had talked about the use of force and so on, it will not be taken serious. But because Nigeria said it, and people believe that Nigeria might have the wherewithal to be able to bring it about, that is why it became a very serious issue.
All right.
So these are the things that we should realize. For instance, look at the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is, to a very bad extent, an American affair. So America goes into Ukraine, and other European countries, even if they're a little bit reluctant, but because of the influence and the strength of America, in terms of the budgeting of NATO, America has been the dominant spender in NATO, and America is the major contributor So America is far more influential than most other countries put together in Europe. And so when America takes an action, most people, most other countries will want to, whether they are reluctant or not, they will
want to follow suit.
In most cases.
All right.
Yes. So this is what happens. That's the dynamics.
Now,
beyond that, you thought there was something you said about the international configuration,
yes,
of the whole crisis, and that is where the issue is again. And that's where Nigerians have also been worried and are saying no to war in Niger, because one, it's our neighboring country. Two, we have seen what has happened in Ukraine, where over about a quarter, 25% of the entire population of Ukraine has gone,
left the country,
departed that country as refugees, and they have sworn they will never come back. What that means is that 25% of the entire population of Ukraine, has been lost permanently. They are never going to come back to their country. Then internally, about 8 million Ukrainians are displaced within Ukraine itself. So, and then apart from the death, the destruction of infrastructure, and the number of people that have died in the Ukraine-Russia war is horrific. Then you go to Libya. We have seen what happened in Libya. It was essentially the playbook of the West. The destruction of Libya to be an African country, because African countries allowed that to happen. Then we have seen what is going on in Sudan, with various groups, even in the Middle East and Europe and America, taking sides with the various factions in Sudan. And so we know what is going to happen from their playbook. We have seen it happen before. We cannot be fighting proxy wars on behalf of Russia, the Wagner Group, acting on behalf of Russia, and then America, France, and all these other countries. We have done that. It was done during the Cold War in Angola, between the MPLA forces, supported by Russia, and then the UNITA army of Jonas Savimbi, supported by America, and Mozambique and so many other places. So we cannot continue along.
All right, Mr. Chude, let me just, on this line of thought, let's just, the other questions I wanted to ask, but the conversation is just progressing to different areas that I also had in mind. So let's just continue with this last line of thought. The conversations around the United Africa has been really huge. Recently, William Ruto of Kenya, Kagame of Rwanda, I've talked about Malema, a member of the South African Parliament, Museveni. We even had the transition government in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore. Most of these people have had conversations to say we can't anymore allow the West. It seems as though the coup in Niger and what's happening in Niger and how it's been handled and the response is beginning to open up the minds of many other African leaders who are saying the West is having so much influence, Europe is having too much influence. France is one of those countries that has been mentioned in Europe, especially with the situation in Niger and Mali and Cameroon and many other parts of Africa, in the western parts of the country. And they are saying, United Africa, we should begin to own our own and do our own stuff, even if it means mapping out our own system of government, having our own currency. The list goes on and on. What's your view to this?
Look, this discussion has been going on even from the moment of independence, right from the moment of independence in Africa, for African countries. We saw what rabid capitalist or imperialist, neo-colonial Africa has become, and that is the poodle of the West. And we have seen the devastating effect that has had on the African continent. But again, while these discussions, for instance, you've always had people like, Jerry Rawlings, who always talked in that vein. Muammar Gaddafi also talked in that vein. Kwame Nkrumah
also did. Even the late Mugabe also said the same thing.
Thomas Sankara and all that. But you know what happened to most of these people? Most of them were eliminated, by the conspiracy of the West. Also working with African political elites, sometimes within the military. That is what Thomas Sankara was taken out, supposedly or allegedly by the French government. And France has been involved in no less than 60 coups in Africa since independence. America has also been involved in some of the coups that have taken place. In fact, at a particular point in time, there was the former president, about 3 presidents of America, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Gerald Ford of the United States, issued executive orders making it, banning American foreign intelligence agency, the CIA, from being involved in elimination of African, foreign political leadership, because that was what they did. Once they defined what constitutes their strategic national interest, any leader, whether in Africa or in Latin America or any part of the world, that represents a threat to their strategic national interest will be eliminated or assassinated using people from those countries. And so that was how Patrice Lumumba of Democratic Republic of Zaire,
Zaire Republic at the time,
of Congo now was killed. Because he was propped up, and Mobutu Sese Seko was propped up by the CIA. And so when you are not in tandem with their thinking, protecting their strategic national interest, you'll be eliminated. So African political leaders have been compromised for far too long. And so it is going to be difficult. While it is important to build an Africa that is strong, an Africa that can stand on its own, so we can be able to properly utilize our natural resources. Africa is the richest continent in the world, but it is, contradictorily the poorest country in the world. Why is that so? Because what these people have done is to create strife and crisis, just as we have in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Because once you have stable governments, you're going to have a stable national army. And then once that happens, they will not be able to come into your country and take some of these, mineral resources on the cheap. So what they do is that they encourage militias and some of the conflicts that you are seeing all over Africa. Some of these conflicts are induced from outside, so that they can properly harness the resources of the African continent. But unfortunately, we also have political leadership that are also compromised through corruption. A lot of them are incompetent, but most of them are corrupt. In Africa, I'm talking about Africa's political leadership, the presidents and all that. And so for as long as you have that, it becomes very difficult for some of them to stand, to want to do the right thing. So I agree that we need to build a united, Africa. That is what the African Union is all about. That integration among Africans, because once you can be able to integrate and build your economies together, have a common currency and all of these other things that are needed to, when you have that kind of union, Africa will be exceedingly strong. And once Africa is strong, we can be able to keep out the
Mr. Chude,
foreign forces out of Africa.
Let's take a few calls and then we'll come back and perhaps get your response on implications, what's happening in Niger and its implications on Nigeria directly, because we touched a bit on it, but I was going to ask you, so we have a proper response to it. Should politicians in Nigeria be concerned? If we look at all of this started in Niger, it was most Nigerians online that I was able to reach out to have said bad government, bad leadership, poor economic situation, and the rest of them. They've taken that for far too long and are tired of it. And the military coming in now felt like a relief, felt like a breath of fresh air. It felt like it was going to be something new for them. In fact, Traore, who's recently made the head of the transition government in Burkina Faso, I was watching him yesterday, and people were happy that he is going to be in charge of this, and I began to feel like, are we sure we might see that transition if the people are very comfortable with what's happening in Burkina Faso at the moment? So should Nigerian politicians be concerned? Should they begin to worry? Should the Nigerian government begin to put its house together? And also, let's not forget what it would mean for us if we had any insurrections in Niger because of the border that we share. I will get your thoughts on these in a matter of moments. Let's just take a few calls first. We'll start with Robin, who's in Achike. Hello, Robin. Good morning.
Good morning, my brother. I'm Andrew.
Okay, yes. Please, straight to the point shortly.
Yes, to the point. Greeting to your guests in the studio. And to elaborate analysis.
Thank you.
I am worried, you feel me? I'm going to repeat myself here on this platform. The former head of state of Nigeria, Baramosi Babangida, prior before the 2023 election, he warned Nigerian politicians to be careful. And I have said it on air severally. Because some of us, like me, I don't have a name. But Babangida has a name. Do our politicians care? Can you tell me the rationale behind the actions of our politicians prior to the election? Their meeting ground became France, Chatham House. Here, they were trotting the globe as if they were trekking to the stream at their backyard. And look at what is going on. Look at what your guest is saying. That the things that some of us do not know. Some people know, but on a blind eye. How can we be running a democracy? Then people will not be allowed to vote their conscience. People will be carrying chains to be flogging people. Vote for party B or party A. It all happened here. Is that democracy? Is that democracy? I think that our politicians should be worried. Those agbada they wear, they forget the history. That what happened in 1966, they've forgotten. They should be worried and careful and allow people to participate in their government as a shrine in our constitution.
All right, Robin, let's go to Chima now in Mount 3. Chima, good morning. Yes, go on, straight to the point.
Yes, Andrew, people who fought more people, they saw that indeed it was the government that gives the people right to air out in terms of opinion and fully entrenched in the society, which gives equal right to everybody. But when we look at democracy in Africa, can we say indeed that we are practicing democracy? Because it is that democracy in Sinai is different from this one in Africa. We have seen inducement, we have seen violations of fundamental human rights. So can we say that democracy is working? Then, specifically in Nigeria here. Now, Andrew, last election, is this indeed election that we can say and dance that election was conducted in democratic government? So we must consider all these things before we start playing role as so perceive elder brothers to the Africa. Why would end our decision? Everything is that way.
All right, Chima, thank you. Temple in Rumumasi, good morning.
Good morning once again, the very distinguished Ifemi, and I salute your guest.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yes, the very distinguished Ifemi, and if I may quickly, most of the things you have outlined, there is indeed a risk implications. People will be badly affected here. Nigeria sometimes will even our rate of refugees will increase because some of them might run to Nigeria for safety, and that's also wasting more money. I want to appeal, if there is a great support, one way or the other, Nigeria has been to them, like the power they have withdrawn, some of those things, whatever it is that we can withdraw from them in order to frustrate them, I think we should adopt that modality. For the sake of people living over there, war has not even it escalate and bring more collateral damages to those people. So whatever they can put as a siege or protect their effort over there, they should adopt those measures.
All right, Temple, thank you. Muriel in Okrika, good morning to you.
Okay, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Muriel.
Woman.
Go on.
Look, actually, I was a child when Abacha killed Sarowiwa and his group. And then in town, Agrizo then, in that cemetery was where they buried them. They totally blocked that place. Nobody had a say. Everybody kept quiet. Look, actually, let's look at this possibility. Is it possible that majority of Nigerians are against this military, but they cannot even come out to speak? How dare they come out? Only those that are in support of the military can come out. If that possibility is absolutely there, clearly, they are scared because of this. It's the military we're talking about. Look, actually, if the military comes, when we're talking about military, actually, in a military situation, even this comment we are making, this freedom we are enjoying, many analysts within this, because we don't even have a say. The military can just decide, I can't show you budget, I can't do anything. Look, actually, I think Nigerians and then the ECOWAS should interfere, should go and intercede on the behalf of those, especially I believe the majority of Nigerians that are not too satisfied. Look, what is happening in Nigeria, I think it's just a situation of a man faced between the devil and the BBC.
All right, Muriel, thank you. But we have to move on to Kachatan in Owerri as our last caller, and then we get back to my guest. Hello, Kach. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, straight to the point, please.
The people of Niger said we have oil, we have uranium, we have so many resources, and we live like slaves. They are not celebrating for being liberated. I don't know why we are worrying ourselves here. What happened there? The people are actually happy. The West have a way of exploiting Africa. They don't want Africa to have a good trade. That's why they remove people like Thomas Sankara. Any leader that means well in Africa, we remove either by supply like you. Our thank God Africa has waking up. That's the need, like the new money needed for Africa.
All right, Kaja-san, thank you very much, but we don't have a lot of time. Mr. Chude, you heard some of the callers and the responses. A few messages also we have here, but first let me get your thoughts in about 2 minutes because we have to wrap things up quickly in 3 minutes' time. Should we be worried in the country? Should Nigerian politicians be worried?
Let me just say this first of all. The lady from Achike, she's speaking her mind. She's spoken well too, and every other person has also contributed. You know, first of all, I mean, the military administration in this place or dictatorship. Eventually, when the people made up their mind, they didn't want them. They got them out. So nobody says there's no country in the world where the military can remain in power forever when the people do not want them. You understand? So that is very clear. It's clear. It's possible that some people are afraid of the military. They don't want to come out. But what we have seen is clearly the people that are rejoicing. That are rejoicing are genuinely rejoicing because they are tired. They have gotten nothing from their democracy. But beyond that, we should be worried about any, military intervention in Niger. One, it will not bode well for the country. We do not have the resources. 93% of our budget is being used to service, our country's debt. So it is, I don't know how the president, just without thinking about the financial implications, after he's the one telling us to make sacrifices. He's the one that removed the software subsidy that the country needs to save money. So the money that you are saving, you want to use it to prosecute a war in somebody else's country. So it doesn't make sense. We do not have the money. Then our soldiers are spread everywhere in the country in areas of conflict that they have not been able to resolve after about 12 years against insurgents, against Boko Haram, against herdsmen, against government. They are still there. They are still happening. People are still being killed. You have not protected Nigerians sufficiently, but you want to go to Niger to protect Niger. It's like in Nigeria. It's like a man whose house is on fire. You have not been able to put out your fire. Then you hear that your neighbor's house is on fire, and then divert resources to the question of your neighbor's house, the fire on his house. So it gives you an idea of the kind of sense of priority that the political leaders have, that you can contemplate that. Then two, you didn't even sit down, I'm sure you didn't even sit down with Nigeria's military before you made that pronouncement to ask from the military whether they have the capacity at this particular point in time to be able to respond positively to what's going on in Niger. That's why the National Assembly said that the Nigerian military is not even prepared. We have an unprepared military. So it's an act of irresponsibility, not statesmanship, not being presidential, for you to commit your country to a war that you are not prepared for,
right,
a war that you have no justification for. So it's dangerous because it will set off a chain reaction of other things. Weapons will start pouring into the West African sub-region. Both the Russians,
all right, Mr. Chude, thank you very much, but unfortunately, we're out of time. We have to wrap things up. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's go for a commercial.
Nigeria Info. Right back after this.
Chude.